Well, I guess, I mean, I could talk all day about this. So are there things that, I know. Are there things that you think somebody who wouldn't, who's coming into, into this process, what do you think they would want to know?
Do you have an idea?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of those things. Like, I think it's just like the first step. It's like, what do you do? Because some people are starting from ground zero and don't know.
Yeah.
There may be others that are knee deep in the situation. It's very complex. There's children involved. There's some PTSD. You talked about the mental aspect as well. But I think like in the guests we've had on the show, they've already like had some legal action taken. They were in the process of going through it all and the complexities of it all. But just understanding what there is out there in terms of resources and availability. You talked about the family court, the emergency aspect, like all of those things I think are helpful to know. But it's like, I think we like to talk about like ground zero, and then, and for also recognizing those that have also already gone through the process as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, some other things I perhaps could add from maybe just like selecting a lawyer type of situation is, I always recommend to parties or somebody who's coming in to see me for a consult, I always say, go with who you feel most comfortable with, because this is a very personal, engagement, but also make sure they do family law. Because I think sometimes people think like, a restraining order, a divorce, it's like you plug in the assets or you plug in the support numbers and it spits out a whole little AI divorce agreement. And it's not. It's so fact specific, and you really have to understand not just the law, but the human interaction between the parties, between the judge, and how all that relates in trying to settle, and whether you can settle. I mean, there are some that, extreme narcissist on the other side, and, your typical sort of tactics aren't going to work, and you just, you have to go a different route. But when you hire somebody who has the family law experience, we've seen all of that, and, we understand those dynamics. So, it's the comfort of who you connect with, and who you feel is, going to be best. It doesn't mean they have to be or should be the loudest person or the most aggressive person, because that also does not necessarily equate to certainly doesn't equate to a better result. But I think, talking with a few attorneys, if you have that capability of retaining one, and seeing who fits with your life and what you need is an important one. And it's okay if you meet with somebody and you think they're nice, but you're like, I found somebody else who I think is a better fit. Because the best work as an attorney is when you and your client really can work together, because you're on the same team. And if a client doesn't feel, confident or feels like, your approach is not how they want it, it makes for a difficult, working relationship in the long run. So for me, it's really important to have a client feel like they're making the best choice, when they retain our office. So I always hope that, suggest that and recommend that for anybody looking for counsel.
That's a really good point, because the person is going to be very transparent in terms of what happened. And just on the topic of domestic violence in the first place, it can be uncomfortable to talk about. It's like you are spilling the beans, like you're sharing very detailed information, and you want to be able to share that with someone you feel comfortable with. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah,
because I mean, sometimes, we'll have a client who gives a summary, and then, as we get to know each other, they give me a lot more details, and I'm like, tell it all to me. But, I get it, because some of it is just, there's embarrassment. I mean, I've had women who are, who share something and are like, I know I shouldn't have done this. I can't believe I was, I allowed this, or, all these self-shaming sort of, pointing the finger at themselves. And it's like, no, that's not, but it's hard to share that, because, nobody wants to be in a situation where, they're in a domestic violence relationship. I mean, that's what makes it such a vicious circle, right, of getting out of it. And so, it is really important and it's important to share everything, the good and the bad. And even if you did something as in retaliation or anything else, you got to share it, because, not knowing the information as an attorney. I mean, I had one case, it wasn't a DV, but I was standing there and we were asking for a vacate, and then I find out that they had just gotten back, had spent some time together recently.
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
like, and the judge looks at me and I was like, well, okay, Your Honor. He's like, do you have anything else to add? And I was like, no, I think, I'll leave it to the court's discretion. Because at that point, but I didn't even know, and so my client, and at least if I had known, and let's just, if we turn that into a DV situation, it could have been a situation where somebody did go back with somebody who they made allegations of abuse. But at least if I know, then I know how to address it with a court versus standing there and the other side spinning it like, see, they weren't even telling, they're really not scared of that person, which is so far from the truth often. I mean, that's why it's such a cycle, right? It's
Such
hard
a cycle.
to leave.
That's what I was going to say too. Is I think the person's abusive. You get the restraining order. Now all of a sudden they're so sorry. They're so wonderful to you for a while,
Right.
and you think it's going to get better. And during that restraining order period, you found out they've spent time together, and I know that's very difficult.
Yeah.
And really, it shouldn't happen because that's not going to be in your favor as a victim. Am I right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't do it, girls or boys.
No, and it's,
It's not
Yeah.
funny, but it's
Yeah.
because
No.
It's true.
they are nice for a while. So you want it, you hope it will get better, and they talk you into it won't happen again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of that whole
Well,
cycle of abuse, right?
and I think as human nature is like you want to forgive, or you want to find the good, and you want to find that connection that you think is there, but it's an unhealthy one, and that's where it's so hard to differentiate between like you're saying, Jody, somebody who comes back and is kind and doing all this stuff. It's still, that's not a healthy response, because that doesn't take away or negate,
Because it's not going to
or
get better.
change the other the other part. Like, that's just a behavior of today. That does not address the underlying abusive behavior. And there's there's different anger management programs, and I had this one case, and it was interesting. And I was talking to one of the program coordinators who had been running it for a really long time, and he was saying is that with some perpetrators, like, they need to be held accountable. So if there's like a violation of a restraining order, like, that don't get them angry. Don't, just keep, like, you have the restraining order, that's going to like keep you safe. But like these like passive aggressive or other things, let's just not do it. He's like, it doesn't work that way. And it's like, until there's actually some real consequence, which is why, a violation of a restraining order is a criminal offense, because that is like, it goes on your record. You have to hire like jail time. I mean, it's, and that's not to say it will change the behavior per se, but that's why it's such a significant consequence if there's a violation, because people need, in those situations, that's what he was saying is, that's your only way of attempting to change some of this behavior is to report a violation. Otherwise, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. And it's a small percentage of people,
teeny tiny percentage
rehab.
of change.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we know that.
I mean, I can say in my practice, be almost 20 years soon, I've had only one client, and again, I don't live with him or with him all the time, so I can't speak to, how he is outside of, that I have seen change, and, but everybody else, like, it's not. It's like, it's so frustrating, because if my client comes back to me again and again, over different things, and sometimes it's, the physical threat, if they get a divorce, that not always, but sometimes then it becomes this emotional, like with parent in custody, or sending nasty emails to the school saying, well, of course that, she said this or that, and, she's a horrible mother, and just any chance they can just to, and they don't change.
Right.
Yeah.
It only
know?
gets worse.
So just because
It's a
they got a
shame.
divorce doesn't mean they just
Right.
find another way of,
Right.
being
'Cause
abusive.
they still
Right.
want control
Exactly.
over everything. They
Right.
want very often custody, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to push
Yeah.
for that because that's another part of control.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then alleging mental health issues with
Right.
the DV victim, and saying, oh well, they're unstable, and trying to sort of undercut the reporting of the violence or the trauma on this person, of trying to twist and turn it around to make it about like she's crazy or something,
Right.
as to
Yeah.
why
To
she's
invalidate.
to invalidate. And it's frightening to see that, and to be in that situation. And it happens like slowly, like it's not I think sometimes we think it's this quick change, but it's
Right.
like those little things, like I remember you were talking to me about, like, why are you doing that, or like a school or something where you were going to go to school, Jody. You were thinking for college, when you were going to go to college.
Oh, are you talking about when I thought I was going to go to a certain school?
A certain school, and then it was like, oh,
Yeah.
don't do that, and it was
Right.
like all these like little things to sort of invalidate or control, to keep you down,
Well,
and you don't.
I mean, there's so many reasons that could happen. You want to be near that person. You're madly in love. You're,
Yeah,
right.
so you think, oh, I should. I mean, someone that we spoke with, actually, she said she didn't go to prom because he didn't want her to go to prom because of the jealousy, probably. I mean, there's so many choices very often that victims make. I mean, that are because, for many reasons. I mean, he and his friends talked me into the fact that, why do I need to spend that kind of money on college when I can go nearby to a state school? And I know it as a victim, looking back, it's easy to see
Right.
what it was. It was about control.
Yeah.
And that I was nearby, and I was crazy to spend that much money. Looking back, I know now many signs,
Right.
but so one of my million woulda, shoulda, guess. Let's just put it that way. So
Yeah.
I'm just so grateful you're here, Sarah, today, because really that first step of the restraining order is so important,
Yeah.
and we just really need people to know that there's a chance they can get out and not be afraid,
Right.
Yeah.
or they can get out of the relationship, or they can get that person out and
Right.
not be afraid for you and your children,
Yeah.
because thinking that they are allowed to come back.
Right. And, in the probate and family court, under statute, when they're considering custody, the court is required to consider the effect of domestic violence in making any custody determination as well. And so that is a factor, when you're looking into a parenting plan, is the effect of DV, the effect, or how the DV is directed at a child, or and all of that, that consideration. And I should add, too, is that if somebody goes in to get an ex parte restraining order and it's not granted, there is no notice given to the other side. They just would deny the restraining order. Well, one would hope that would never happen.
Yeah.
And also, if somebody, thought, well, if I go in, if I'm not granted, then they're going to find out. And then,
Right.
I see.
and then that's going to be even worse because I didn't get the
Now
restraining
then-
order.
Right.
And now they're even angrier.
Right.
Just as a sort of a point,
That's a good
so that
point.
people aren't dissuaded from trying,
In other
to
words,
do.
so if you went in but it didn't get it granted, the abusive partner is not. It won't even know that you went in
Right.
for it.
That's
Thank
right.
goodness
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really
So,
good. And I feel like overall, like, domestic violence is such like a hidden subject. Like,
Yeah.
even the signs of it could be hidden to the victim. They may not be aware of what's happening. And I mean, even like my sister, she passed away in 2017 from domestic violence by her boyfriend. He killed her, right? And we didn't know, like, the extent. Like, my family and I did not know the extent of what was happening because, it was the hiding. Knew some things, like,
Right.
I could only call her when she was at work, or driving home from work. But once she arrived home, no communication. it like went radio silence. So didn't know, he was physically abusing. I didn't know, like, she would cover up her face with makeup. I didn't know. I didn't even recognize it. But my cousin later told me, like, oh, did you notice at the party you had for your daughter, she had makeup around her eye? I'm like, no, didn't notice. Like, whew, had no idea. And then you mentioning, like, hey, when you meet with a lawyer, be transparent. And I think it's difficult for people because of the hiding of the subject overall.
Right.
There's like a level of embarrassment.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely.
I mean? Like,
yeah, you can see it in the client's demeanor and how they're trying to share. And that's why I say also put it in writing, because sometimes it's almost sort of like a journaling almost, that can be a helpful way, but it's also, you can write it all down and then give it to me and I will read it by myself. So you don't actually have to say the words and share it. And so sometimes that's almost sort of like, well, this person wrote this. I wrote it, but it's not, And so it's a little bit, it takes the pressure off of sitting and telling somebody and having to verbalize that, because that's, saying it out loud, I think is harder than writing it down.
That's true.
And I can read much faster than I could sit for days sometimes with a client. And first of all, I have horrible handwriting. I could, if I could live through med school, I'd probably be a great doctor because you can't read my handwriting. But I can read so much faster than I can sitting with a client and writing, notes that will be very hard to read later, or even typing my notes, and doing that. And it's that's also a great cost savings, because if it takes me half an hour to read something that would have taken us hours,
Good point.
Again, like any way that we can try to not only be efficient, but also
keep costs
down, because everybody works hard, and there's only so much money to go around, and I think that's something as a lawyer we try to be considerate of, especially in cases where there really isn't any money and somebody really needs the services as well.
Yeah.
Well, plus I'll say this is if you're really upset, you're with an attorney and the emotions or of what you're going through are so, I just know myself, I would later be like, oh, this happened.
Right.
I forgot to tell her, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so if you're writing things and you're able to, put your list somewhere safe, in your underwear drawer, I don't know, under your mattress, I don't know. But if you're able to make that list, because you're going to, obviously it's an experience, as you experience different things, you write it down. The other thing is that you think, is this, you get a feel when something's happening. So write it down.
Yeah.
Right.
Go with your gut.
Because either you're not going to remember it, or, you're so upset that you're forgetting things, or you're not sure about things. I think writing it down makes sense, because know what's...
Well, that's what I say. Put everything in. Don't sit there and be like, what does she want? Because, what sometimes clients will say stuff and I'll be like, oh, we listen, empathetic, understanding, but my notes, I'm like, not relevant, Yeah. But then there's other things where clients like, oh, by the way, and I'm like, oh, relevant, circle, and by doing the writing, and the summary, I go through and then I can say, okay, tell me some more about this, So I will ask follow-up questions and all of that. But it really is, anybody on a good day, it's like almost telling your recent biography to somebody you just met. Like, who could ever remember all the details of stuff that you also really, your brain does try to forget.
Right.
So when I say to do the summary, if it's not an emergency exigent type situation, I say do it over like a week, do it a day, leave it for a few days, come back and, just add to it, over a week, because, then your brain starts to think and you look back, you're like, oh, I forgot about this.
Right. Exactly. I only wish I had known.
Right.
I only wish I had known.
Oh.
Anyway, do you have any else thing?
I think
ask.
Yeah, I lost my thought.
Oh no! Tell me about losing your thought.
I know, and I had one other thing I wanted to mention, but
we're both.
We're both.
That's because I interrupted.
No. It was something.
So in terms of record keeping and documenting and everything, you made a good point about like, hey, write it all down. And you can discern whether it's relevant or not. So the person writing it down shouldn't try to make that determination on their own. Just write it all down. If it's not applicable, it's not. Like we had a guest where the abuser was abusing the cat.
Oh, yeah, right. Oh, gosh.
You know, that's a person could think, oh, it doesn't count, not a human. It might. Write it down
absolutely.
anyway.
That's like,
Right?
you know,
Yeah.
And that's why, exactly. Like, and if you're not sure, just put a little something, and then if I can ask a follow-up, you know, question on that. The other thing, and that reminded me then of what I wanted to say was, you know, any evidence that you have, you know, a safe place or family or friends or somebody who can, you know, who can hold on to it, because digital devices can be deleted. Text messages, there's also various app programs. I am not a technology person. The one I have had clients use, and I'm not endorsing by any stretch, but is iMazing, you know, I and then M-A-Z-I-N-G. And you can download all your text messages. And the nice thing about that is that it does it in the bubbles like you see on your phone. And so it will also keep track of the times and the dates. Because when you do screenshots, you don't know unless you screenshot it that day. But even then, the actual photo doesn't, you know, the text doesn't say the date. So you could screenshot something a year later, and, you know, that wouldn't be the right date.
That's a good
So
point.
you can go back and, you know, I've had like 1,000-page PDF of text messages. But, you know, people can go back and delete text messages, and I think sometimes that can be hard to restore. So if there is anything that is in text messages, download them, you know, and again, save them with, you know, share them with somebody who can keep them safe. The other thing to know too is videos. And this is more a point of reference, that if you are videoing somebody, you have to have their consent. So, you know, if there is you know, as long as you say, like, you know, I am videoing you right now in this situation, and I'm not saying whether one should or shouldn't video, because that, you know, that's a safety, a whole separate situation. But if you record somebody without their knowledge, that's a violation of the federal wiretapping law. So, you know, just to be mindful, you know, you wouldn't want to get yourself in trouble for videoing a situation, you know. And so, for example, if a client did that, I wouldn't use that as evidence in the case, because I wouldn't want to get my client in trouble. It's helpful in terms of,
but for a reminder.
It does, you know, you would be able to see it as the lawyer, you know, between your client, but it wouldn't be something one could use, you know, as evidence. So, you know, just say, I'm videoing, you know, you right now, if somebody thought that that was an appropriate thing to do at that moment.
That's good to know.
And if they say to stop, then, you know, legally,
Stop.
you're supposed to stop that,
I know there's so much we could talk about. I do want to mention, though, one of the people that we've spoken with, when they went to court about the restraining order, I think it must have been, she said that she felt like she was getting questioned, like she was the abuser. And do you see that at all? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the initial burden of obtaining a restraining order is on the plaintiff, the one seeking the restraining order, because you have to show that you are in imminent fear of, you know, physical bodily harm or the coercive control. And so, you know, in doing that, you do have, unfortunately, that burden of showing what has happened and why you're scared.
And maybe feeling that way. Not to say you shouldn't do it, but just so I bring it up so people are prepared.
Right,
know.
because they do question, and, you know, every judge is different. Sometimes you have the judge who can handle it in a way that's questioning but doesn't feel like accusatory or sort of like, you know, questioning back, like, are you sure he really hit you? Or, you know, but like asking, you know, can you explain, you know, the events, or, you know, asking for maybe more detail.
Right.
But there are judges, I'm sure, who can do it in a way that feels more like you're almost on the defense of trying to prove, you know, it's almost like you said what happened, but then you're trying to really prove that it really did happen. And a lot of these things, you know, it's not like the proverbial black eye. It's all of there's all of these other things, or the black eye was weeks ago and it's not there anymore. And how do you know? So it's very it's not very often that you have like a document that like you can hold up and it's, or the defendant's like, I was physically violent, and signs it. You don't have that. So it does make, I think, the person seeking the restraining order feel a bit like they have to defend, prove what happened in a way that it may feel like it's questioning. So it
just bring it up so that people are prepared and not feeling. I just don't want people to feel like that they're being. Yes, they're being questioned, but I like you say, just be prepared and ready that might happen. But like you say, for the most part, judges see what or hear what they're hearing, and you know what I mean.
And I always, the advice I say to my clients is like, your truth. Like, you just speak your truth. Like, just, put on the blinders. And this wonderful woman from early intervention who worked with my daughter as a rare genetic condition, she told me this once, and I think it's great advice, because the one step, one day at a time, to me, I'm like, I'm already five steps ahead, thanks, that does not work. But, when you drive at night, you have your headlights on, right?
Yeah.
And so all you do is look at what is right in front of your headlights. You're not worrying about what's beyond that next curve or anything outside of your headlights. It's literally what's right in front of you.
Great advice.
And so, I use that in my personal life, but I also with my clients or in any of this situation, I just try to, it's almost like the blinders, like just focus on just what the question is, like just what is right in front of you. Try not to go further than that, because then it's this overwhelming sense of all of it. And just like, your truth, you say it. And you just keep saying it, and that's all you can do. You can't change somebody else. You can just say your truth.
That's really good advice.
That's right. You can't change somebody else. That's for sure.
I was wondering, and I'm thinking of this question now as it's coming up. That's why I love this conversation. I was telling you before, like, we keep it casual. We're just like, we just share what's on our mind and everything. So in the restraining order case, like when you go to court, say, whoever the survivor is, we'll use that word, right? Whoever this domestic violence survivor is, say an adult witnessed the abuse, could that witness come forward as during the court hearing?
Yeah, you can, you can absolutely, at the initial restraining order, have that person in the courtroom with you. If for some reason, the judge had any questions or felt like they needed to hear, you could say, I have, a witness who could testify, Your Honor, if the court felt that was necessary. I would say that's probably less likely on the initial restraining order, unless, it was a close call. But, usually if there is enough there to grant the restraining order, but at the 10-day hearing, that might be a time where, because now you have the other side who's going to be like, oh, no, it was we just bumped elbows or whatever, there was whatever it is, saying a very different story. And so having those, witnesses, are, any tool you can have in the toolbox.
That's good to know. So that's part I keep going back to record keeping. It's I think it's just how my brain works, because I have lists. So that's why it's important to document, particularly where you are when it happened, and perhaps who was around, because you may forget. Someone perhaps could have seen it happen nearby. If you're at an event or somewhere, you have that witness there. You can just write their name just to remember, and remember to share it with your lawyer. This is where I was. This is what happened. Just you saw it, potentially saw it at least, right?
And dates blend together too. It's just you think that was 6 months ago, and then I was like, that was the spring of 2024. We've already had a spring since then, we're a year and a half later. So, the more you can write the dates, and don't go backwards and try to clients are like, I spent all night going through my text. I'm like, if you're early June, that's fine. If it's a particular day and incident or something that really does have significance of having a date, then yes, that's helpful. But when you're going kind of backwards and just looking in general, you can say it was in the spring, this spring of 2025, this happened, or but it doesn't, don't drive yourself nuts trying to reverse journal every day, but going forward, it does. And it can also help remind you of, what happened that day of having that. So,
Yeah.
but I thought I just would read the language of the, what abuse is.
Great.
And I know maybe it will sound sort of like
Thank you.
legal gobbledygook, but I think it's helpful because this is the very basis of getting a restraining order.
Perfect.
And so abuse is considered to be the attempting to cause or causing physical harm, placing another in fear of imminent serious physical harm, causing another to engage involuntarily in sexual relations by force, threat, or duress. And then now we also have coercive control. So that's A, B, C, and D. Those factors are what is how the basis for granting a restraining order. And then the coercive control, they sort of went through before, but is a pattern of behavior intended to threaten, intimidate, harass, isolate, control, coerce, or compel compliance of a family or household member that causes that family or household member to reasonably fear physical harm or have reduced sense of physical safety or autonomy, including but not limited to, and this is where isolating family, isolating them from family or friends, relatives, and other sources of support, depriving the family or household member of basic needs, controlling, regulating, or monitoring a family member or a household member, including, movements where, the good old iPhone, the tracking, finances, economic resources, where they're spending money, and any technology, means as well. And then also compelling a family or a household member to abstain from or engaging in specific behavior or activity, including, behavior or activity.
Wow.
Wow. Thank you.
Yes.
That is
And
so
it goes on, but,
good.
including threatening, a child or a relative in the family, also threatening to commit cruelty or abuse to an animal connected to a family or household member, intentionally damaging property belonging to the family or household member, and threatening to publish sensitive personal information relating to that family or household member, including sexually explicit images, and, it goes on. But those are that's the very basis of, of the restraining order.
But how great is that?
Yeah.
Because it's not just the
Physical.
the bruises.
Right.
That's so awesome to
Yeah.
hear that.
Yeah, it is. And that's what, and I think that's education and exposure, and really, especially with, social media. I have a 10, almost 11-year-old, and she's like, not social media, but even the iPad, I'm like, it rots your brain. I'm like, don't use it, like, da, da, da. But you see so many things that, for girls, for body image,
Right.
but also I think inappropriate relationships and all different things. It's just the access that kids, have these days to, to things is frightening. And I think then in the sense of DV, it also can portray unhealthy relationships, but not have it in a way that kids, it's on a show. And so there isn't that discussion of what that means.
Right.
It's just they see it, and the more you see something, the more it becomes sort of commonplace, and you don't understand that's
So glad you
wrong.
brought that up.
So really the education for young kids and young women.
Why it's so important for me to be able to get into the schools.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
And even middle school, it's it really is it's sadly shifting younger and younger. I think of kids in terms of their access and how what they're interested in and stuff. So I think as much as high school is important, it's really and obviously in an age appropriate way.
Right.
Exactly.
But for middle school, I really think it's starting to set, especially for women, healthy boundaries.
Oh my
and
gosh.
it's in relationships, because almost when you get into high school, you're now in it. And so
That's right.
if you can start that younger, then you're maybe hopefully better able to see those signs when you're, in high school.
You know what's
So-
not right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm telling you, I've worked hard to try to get into schools, and yes, but they feel like I should only speak to seniors or maybe juniors and seniors. I feel like saying, I will say, are you kidding? You're kidding. I know, right? Shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking. But
That's a good point. I'm
But
glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
thank you.
I mean, I
yes.
really do think they're like healthy boundaries and
Yeah.
like, and it would be an important thing to start in middle school, because if you can start on sort of that self-respect and the boundaries, I think that's like a foundation
Right.
that you can build off of and work more towards maybe the very pointed things about DV as kids get older. But if you don't set that foundation, it's harder, I think, for kids, to set up those boundaries because they haven't been practicing.
Well, I think I know that as far as education, we're getting on now a whole different
Yes, and
subject.
that's-
But I just have to
Yeah.
quickly say that I've heard, it said that, yes, we talk about healthy relationships. Well, that's very important, and I'm glad to hear that. But don't you think some examples, if I were to come in and speak and make it age appropriate, isn't that kind of important? Because I've been through it.
Yeah.
I think so.
I grew up in it. You know what I mean? Do you think
Yeah.
that? I'm just curious what your thought is about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on, specifically what you're saying,
Right.
like in the age appropriate, but I absolutely do. I mean, I think you can start with, as I said, about like making your personal decisions, like boundaries, which
Yeah.
in general is
Write
like,
that down.
I think for women,
Or signs that, I was 19 for crying out loud. At least let me get in touch with the freshman.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, no, I think, and again, I think you can like tier it into for every age
Exactly,
of like,
of course.
and
That's a
especially
good
for
idea.
women, I think we, it's sort of if you can, you do, and so I don't know, science, whatever reasons, society, probably a combination of everything. I think we have a harder time setting boundaries and understanding or setting those boundaries. And I think
Right.
if we could learn that, and help, that is one of the pieces about sort of a boundary for yourself of like what's an
Right.
acceptable, and then what are those warning signs? So it's like
Right.
it kind of all flows
Yeah.
together. And I think you can do it in an age appropriate way. And,
Hey.
I mean, it's,
And if you're growing
It's-
up in it, you might realize
Yeah.
you're really
And
not
kids-
okay.
and
Excuse
kids
me.
talk about it. I mean, it's like
Right.
my daughter's in 5th grade. I mean, they're like, sometimes they have no idea what they're doing, but other times you're like, wow, and it's the same because you're,
Yeah, I have
you're
11-year-old
you
girls,
know,
yeah.
and it's like some of the things. So it's like, if you don't talk about it, like, then you're not teaching about
Exactly.
it. And so I think
Yeah,
it's like,
so true.
they hear from their family, friends or different things. And, education.
Yeah.
I mean, you sweep it under the rug, it does not go away.
It doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It just gets worse.
Exactly.
I have to be sure people know Attorney Stuart, Stuart. It's Harsip and Stuart.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you're located on Great Road in Acton.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean you have to live in Acton to use Attorney Stuart. I just recommend you highly, and I mean that. I've known you for years.
Yeah.
I know you know what the heck you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah.
and I just say it's so important.
Yeah.
So important.
It is.
To talk to an attorney, obviously.
It is.
And can I say, people are often, I hear maybe if someone calls you, that first phone call, maybe you won't, you know what I mean? Like you'll hear, oh, my first hour is,
Yeah.
free of charge. I'm not saying that's what
Yeah.
you do, but
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't want a person to be afraid to call you. That's all.
No, I always call, and and I offer 20 minutes of no charge if it's a DV situation, and I can offer some more time, and just to at least point in the right direction if I can't help,
Right,
or somebody,
right.
another firm, or whatever I can do to help. Try
And of course,
like,
the Live
yeah.
for Live Foundation can also be of assistance.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know to a point, but no, for at least for the beginning,
Right.
Yeah.
we can provide funds
Yeah.
for
Oh
to-
no, you
for help.
and you did. And what was really neat was a client of mine, actually, some funds were provided, and I didn't even know.
Ah,
And
there
we
you
were
go.
emailing, and she's like, "I didn't know you were involved," and I was like, "I didn't know, or whatever." So it was just, what a wonderful, resource for,
Right.
besides legal fees of like helping with a mortgage payment or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Or there you go. Yeah.
And that's the thing. The more you reach out, and the more you talk to people, like that's how that's how you can get information. So never be afraid to call, and, and reach out and, if we can help, or if not, can point somebody hopefully in the right direction. And, my heart does go out to, parties who are in a financial situation, who have no, financial ability. And there are some, resources through legal aid and whatnot.
Right.
But I know there's a wide swath of people who don't fit in that category, but also obtaining a lawyer, is financially, difficult. But, we can also do consulting, where instead of going into court just for one hearing, there's ways that we can still sometimes guide the person.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good to know, because
Yeah.
I just need people to know, don't be afraid because of money. I mean, again, looking back, I think, had I known this information about restraining order, I mean, and not to be afraid to get one, and where do I begin?
Right.
Right. So thank you.
Yeah.
No, you're welcome. And
Thanks.
it's the headlights, that's what my girlfriends and I will text each other and say headlights, when something's
Thank
going
you.
wrong. So
Remember that.
it's just to think, if you're thinking of getting a restraining order, think of headlights, think of what's the next thing I have to do. Like, try not to think of 25 things down the list, because then you'll just be like,
Good
no, I'm not
point.
going to do this. This is too much. I'll just do
Yeah.
it another day. And, just one step at a time, but really the headlights, for this process is, I think can be helpful.
Well, and it's a great life lesson too.
It is, right?
It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, thanks so
Yeah.
much for being on the Live Free
You're
podcast
welcome.
today. We appreciate it.
Yeah. No,
So
I
grateful.
adore Jody, and I've really enjoyed our friendship over the years, and supporting Live for Live, and helping
you
with
have.
the bike and run event in July. Before I had kids, I had time, but hopefully someday I will get back
One of
out
these
there.
days,
and
well,
do
especially
it.
now that we
Yeah.
have the 1 mile, you can bring your kids.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. No, I'd love to do that, but it's just such an amazing organization. And Jody, you're such an inspiration.
Oh, thank you.
And both of you. I mean, you've
Thanks.
sadly had to share, the intersection of domestic violence, but you're both making an impact and change. And I think
That's all we can. That's all we
you
can
can do, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Spread
Yeah.
awareness.
But what a
That's-
wonderful
Spread
way to
awareness
honor,
and
you know.
educate of what.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to take that next step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Great.
Thanks so
Oh.
much.
Thank you
Appreciate
both,
you.
and happy Halloween.
Yeah,
Enjoy
that's
some-
right.
I know.
enjoy
and
some-
we're-
and
as I said,
purple
we're in
and-
purple.
Yeah,
We're not in
I know.
orange today because
I
it's
know,
Domestic
it's
Violence Awareness
domestic.
Month. But
Yes.
I feel
otherwise, I'd be in orange.
yeah, but no, but a special day to be able to do this on the last day of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and
Yes.
but let's make that
Exactly.
awareness like not a month.
Yes.
Let's make
Right.
it 365
Exactly.
days a year.
Absolutely. I
Right.
love that you
Yeah.
said that. Thank you.
Oh,
Thanks,
you're welcome.
Sarah.
Anytime.
We
And
appreciate
Anyone that
questions?
needs legal help, as I said,
Yeah.
I've got her information. I've got Attorney Stuart's information, and go on to liveforlive.org, and I'll help you.
Oh, well, thank you. And again, I want to help people, so
Thank you.
wish
Love
everyone the best.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.